Alright guys, so welcome back. Today we are here for a video about arrays. So arrays are a new type of variable we're going to use, but they're not quite new. Basically what it is it's a list of variables that you might have under one specific name. So think back to our roulette program, right? Say you wanted to store bets on each individual number. Well, instead of having like 37 different variables for each of the 37 numbers, it might be better to have one variable with 37 different parts. Or if you have a deck of cards with 52 cards in it, instead of having 52 variables, we could just have one variable that would store each of the 52 spots within that deck. Or a giant spreadsheet, right, in Excel or Google Sheets. Instead of having literally thousands of variables, you just have one variable with a bunch of different parts. And that's what an array is a list of variables that only have one name with several different parts. Okay, so I'm going to walk through what that's going to look like, how you're going to declare it, how to think about that before we go ahead and go over some examples of what it looks like. So when you declare an array of any given type, you declare it like this. So you set up, for an example, int, and you put bracket, bracket, just the closed brackets, like on the squigglies. So let's say you have int bracket, bracket, nums equals, and then you use the word new, just like you do with strings, int, and then you put however many numbers you want to store. So just breaking this down, when you do it like this, it's like declaring any other type of variable. It's saying you're going to make an array of ints. And of course, you could also have an array of strings or booleans or doubles or scanners or any other kind of stupid thing you might want to do. The nums, of course, is just like anything else where we'd name a variable. And the new, we've seen that before. And you just say the type again, it's still an array of ints. And then right here, you give it the length. And again, that length is fixed. So when you say it has a length of 5 spots, it has a length of 5 spots. You can't add or remove spots later. Think of it as like an egg carton, right? If you get this egg carton from the store that has 12 eggs, you can't add or remove them. It just has those spots for 12 eggs. Like you could take eggs out, move eggs around, but you still have 12 spots in that carton. So what it's going to look like is you set up this whole nums. And the entire nums itself looks like this. It's an array that has 5 spots in it. This is kind of how you want to think about it and represent it. So you're going to store a bunch of numbers in there. Say you store, like 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. And the spots in these are numbered. This is numbered like spot nums bracket 0. So the entire array is called nums. If you want to access the specific spot, you do nums bracket 0. It's just like strings. It starts counting at 0. And then here, this spot would be nums 1. Nums 2, nums 3, and all the way up to nums 4. So just like with strings, if this has a length of 5, the spots are labeled spot 0, spot 1, spot 2, spot 3, and spot 4. Okay, so that's kind of how they're represented and what it means. You have an array of one type with different parts in it. Let's go ahead and do some coding. Okay. So I'm going to put this away here. What we're going to do now is let's just do exactly what we did. Let's set up an array of 5 ints. So I'm just in some main method here. We'll write separate methods in the next video, but I'll just set up some array of ints called nums equals new array of ints called with 5 elements. So set up an array of 5 ints called nums. If I wanted to set up an array, say, of 3 strings called the words, I would do string bracket bracket words. It's saying it's an array of strings named words equals a new array of strings, let's say with 3 elements in it. So this is me setting up an array of 3 strings. Okay. And of course, that's called words. So there are some other things we're going to do here. Obviously, we might want to fill in the values. So if you want to put in values here, so if I want to fill in a certain spot, I put that in the brackets. So if I want to fill up the first spot, num0, like I did before, I'm going to set num0 to be 6. And I'm going to copy paste this and just fill up all the rest of the spots too. Okay. So I'm going to set spot 1 to be 7. By the way, if you forget to fill up a spot, it just puts a 0 in it. It doesn't give you any error. It just gives you a 0. I'm going to set spot 3 to be a 9, and I think I set spot 4 to be a 12. So filling up arrays like this can be a little annoying, but that's all right. And of course, if you want to change them later, you can do that. So if I would say, you know what, I'm tired of the number 8, I'm going to set nums2 to be -8. I can change it just like any other variable. So I can print out one element at a time, of course. So if I want to go ahead and say print out, I don't know, like my new -8. So if I wanted to print out that -8, I can print out nums bracket 2. So that just prints out the element. So treat this just like any other variable. It's just saying spot 2 in the array nums. So when I compile this and I run this, it'll give me the element spot 2, which is now a -8. And of course, if I wanted to print out the element in spot 0, that should be a 6. Now, one thing you might be wondering is what would happen if you tried to print something out that wasn't part of your array? So what if you try to print out or access a spot that is outside the bounds? So what if I tried to print out, I don't know, num sub 12? Well, this array only goes up through 4, so you might think this would give an error. And it'll compile, but when you run it right here, of course, it gives you that, it's like a string index out of bounds. It says array index out of bounds. It just says, this array has a length of 5. You tried to access what's in index 12. That is out of bounds on this line. So this gives you a runtime error, which is out of bounds. Okay, so that's what's going on there. If you want to access the length of an array, which is going to be really useful, so to get the length of an array, just like with the strings, you're going to use .length. But, this is kind of interesting, no parentheses after. We'll talk a little bit about why that's different later. But basically, if you want to access the length of nums, you just do nums.length, no parentheses after it. So strings use parentheses, arrays do not, which I know is kind of annoying. But when you run this, it'll give you the length of the array, which is 5, right? It has 5 elements, so there are 5 spots in the array. And again, those are numbered 0 to 4. Okay, so one interesting thing though, if you try and be a chump and put parentheses, it won't even compile. Right? It'll give you this error right here, and when I click on that error, it'll tell me like it can't find a symbol for length. So that's just your indication that you need to use the version without parentheses. Okay, so that's what's going on. Like we said, filling up these arrays can be a little onerous to keep doing over and over. So what you might want to do is fill up many elements at once. So let's say I want an array of all the numbers squared. So I want like 0 to the second power, 1 to the second power, 2 to the second power, and so forth. So all the numbers squared. And I want to have that be like an array of ints, let's call it squares, and I want to access like the first 10 numbers. So I could copy paste them in 10 times. But the real trick and the real thing you're going to do pretty much anytime you're working with arrays is use a for loop. So when you think of like the great love affairs in history, right, you think of Romeo and Juliet, Bill and Monica. But I think for loops and arrays are one of the things that's right up there. So for loops plus arrays equals love. If you're ever wondering how can I do something to a whole array, the answer is almost certainly a for loop. So if I want to fill this up, fill up each spot I with the value of I squared, well, that's not going to be too bad. I'm just going to have a loop, kind of very similar to how we loop through a string. And you might be wondering, like, why am I keep saying the same as a string? A string is just an array of chars. That's basically all it is. So with a string being an array of chars, a lot of the same things you can do with strings, you can do with arrays. Anyway, so let's go ahead and just loop through the squares. So I'm going to do, starting at 0, go less than the length, and that's going to go through every spot. So this is how we go through every spot starting at 0. If you want to start at the end, you start at length -1, you go backwards, just like a string. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill up each spot. So I'll set up square sub I to equal I squared, so I times I. All right, now the next thing we might want to do is make sure this worked properly, right? How can we print it? So you might think, okay, let's just go ahead and print out an array. But I have a surprise for you. And the surprise for you is that Java kind of sucks. So if you try to print out a whole array, Java's going to get salty. And it's going to say, okay, wow, this makes no sense at all. Bracket I at, and then a bunch of numbers and letters. And even worse, if you run it again, it just gives you different, like, this is stupid. So Java doesn't print out an array, which is kind of annoying. So if we need to print out an array, we need to do it by ourselves. So we need to actually go ahead and have it print out one element at a time. So what it actually does, those random numbers are actually the memory location of the array. So it actually here is just printing out the memory location of this array. So that's what's going on there. If you want to access the individual elements and print those, you need a loop. So in this case, we'll go ahead and print out. So again, you know what? I'm just going to copy paste this, right? Like, why not? So I'll just go ahead and I want to print out all the elements here. So instead of just setting one, I'll just go ahead and print that out. So system.out.println squares bracket I. Okay. So I probably want to print just so it'll show up on one screen. So we'll see what that looks like. It's not going to be perfect. What it's going to be is all the numbers put together. So those are the squares, right? 16, 25, 36. But I might want to add some formatting in here. I might want to add in like a comma and a space to make it look a little nicer. And that way when I'll print it out, oh yeah, it actually looks pretty nice, right? So that's the way you can access an array. There's no way to print the whole thing out at once. You got to do the whole thing. Okay, so that's some of the basics of arrays. I'll have some more stuff for you guys in the next video. We'll start talking about some logic and writing methods with them. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.